The rain had not stopped for 3 days. Under a broken stone archway at the edge of Ashenvale City's oldest market, a boy sat alone with half a piece of bread in his hand. He ate slowly, the way people eat when they are not sure where the next meal will come from. His name was Ash, just Ash, no family name, no home, no pack. He was 17 years old, and the city had never once been kind to him. His clothes were old and worn. His boots had holes in the soles. His dark hair fell over his eyes that were a strange shade of amber, almost golden, like firelight trapped inside glass. People who looked into those eyes sometimes felt uneasy without knowing why. They would look away quickly and move on, pretending they had not noticed anything. In the world of Ashenvale, wolves lived alongside humans, but ruled their own society by strict laws of pack and rank. A wolf without a pack was called a rogue. Rogues had no rights. They could not own property, enter certain areas of the city, or ask for protection from the law. The ruling pack of Ashenvale, the Silver Crest, enforced these rules with pleasure. Their patrol wolves sometimes beat rogues simply for standing in the wrong place. It was allowed. Nobody questioned it. Ash had been living as a rogue for as long as he could remember. He never shifted into wolf form. He did not seem to have that ability, which made him even lower than a regular rogue in most wolves' eyes. He was mocked, pushed around, and ignored every single day. But there were things about Ash that were hard to explain. He never fell sick, even in the coldest months. Cuts and bruises healed on his body within hours. 3 times in the past year, Silver Crest patrol wolves had cornered him in dark alleys, intending to hurt him. Each time, they had walked away pale and shaking, refusing to speak about what had happened. One patrol wolf had left his job the very next morning. When his captain asked why, the man had only said, "His eyes changed, and something inside me said to run." Ash did not understand these things. He did not try to. Understanding required energy, and energy was better spent finding food. He had almost no memories from before the age of 6. Only pieces. Warm firelight inside a very large hall. Stone pillars that reached up into darkness. A woman's voice, soft and loving, calling a name he could never quite hold on to. And drums, the deep, heavy sound of war drums, fading away into silence. He had learned not to think about those fragments. The past could not feed you. Only today mattered. That was what he told himself on the cold, rainy Tuesday evening when the old woman walked into his alley and changed his life completely. She was old, silver-haired, straight-backed, wrapped in a traveling cloak that was far too fine for the lower district. She moved through the rain without hurrying, her sharp gray eyes scanning the alley until they found him sitting under the archway. She stopped. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she sat down right beside him on the wet ground, as if sitting in the rain next to a street boy was the most natural thing in the world. "I have been looking for you for 11 years, she said. Ash did not move. He had learned that stillness was a kind of armor. "You have the wrong person," he said. She shook her head. She reached inside her cloak and pulled out a small medallion on a chain. It was made of dark iron, black with age, and carved with the image of a wolf's head surrounded by 7 stars. She held it out toward him. The moment Ash's eyes landed on it, something happened inside his chest. A crack, like ice breaking on a river in early spring. His hands began to shake. The amber color in his eyes deepened, glowing warmer, almost gold. The air around him shifted. Not wind, not heat, but something like a slow, deep pulse, like a heartbeat that belonged to something much larger than one boy. Every stray animal in the alley went perfectly still. A thin cat on a nearby ledge lowered itself into a bow. A street dog flattened itself onto the ground and whined softly. The rain seemed quieter. The old woman did not flinch. She smiled, and there were tears running down her face, mixing with the raindrops. "There he is," she whispered. "There is my king." Her name was Elder Marin. She was one of the last living members of a secret group called the Order of the Ancient Wolf, people who had spent 11 years keeping a truth alive that the rest of the world believed was dead. She told him everything. 11 years ago, a war had torn the wolf world apart. It was not an ordinary war between rival packs fighting over land. It was a war meant to erase an entire bloodline from existence. 6 powerful packs had joined together under the leadership of a warlord named Dravek, the head of a brutal force called the Iron Fang. Dravek had one goal: to destroy the oldest and most powerful wolf bloodline in history, the Kaeldorn line, the line of the Alpha Kings. The Kaeldorn Alphas were not simply stronger or faster than other wolves. They carried something ancient inside their blood, a power that had no simple name, though Marin called it the Prime Command. When a true Kaeldorn Alpha was near, other wolves felt it in their bones. Not fear, exactly. Something deeper. A pull toward stillness, toward respect, toward bowing. Not because they were forced, but because every instinct they had told them this was the wolf they had been waiting to follow. Dravek had understood what this meant. A Kaeldorn king alive and awake was a threat to every false ruler who had built power on cruelty and control. So he had gone to war, and he had been very thorough. The last reigning Alpha King, a man named Kael, had died in the final battle when his great stone keep fell. But before the end came, his mate had escaped. She had run for weeks through wild territory, carrying their infant son, hiding every trace of the boy's identity. She had found a person of great skill and paid them to perform an ancient binding ritual on the child. Something that would suppress his wolf, dim his aura, and keep him invisible to anyone looking for the bloodline. Then she had left him in the lower district of Ashenvale, among the human-adjacent streets, where no powerful wolf would think to look. The boy had been 6 years old. He had watched his mother be taken away by men on horseback. The memory had buried itself so deep under years of hunger and cold and survival that it had become only fragments. Fire, stone pillars, her voice. "Your name is not Ash," Marin said, her voice steady and gentle. "Your name is Akayen Kaeldorn, and you are the rightful Alpha King of the ancient bloodline." For a long moment, Ash, Akayen, said nothing. Then he made a short, quiet sound that was almost a laugh. "I slept under this archway last night," he said. "I ate half a piece of bread today, and that was a good day. I don't have a pack. I don't have a wolf form. I don't have anything." "The binding ritual has been weakening," Marin said. "It was never meant to last forever. You feel it, don't you? The pressure under your skin, the strength that should not be there. The way dominant wolves go quiet around you without understanding why." He said nothing, but something moved behind his eyes. "When you looked at the medallion," she said quietly, "what did you feel?" A long silence passed. "Like something remembered me," he said at last, "even though I didn't remember it." Marin nodded once. She had waited 11 years for that answer. But one old woman's belief was not enough to change anything. The real challenge was the world beyond that alley. Marin brought Akayen before the Underground Council, a secret gathering of wolves who had survived the Fracture War in hiding, former pack members, scholars, families who had lost everything to Dravek's war. These were people who, if anyone, should have wanted the Kaeldorn king to be alive. They did not believe him. A heavy-set council member named Veth looked Akayen up and down. The worn clothes, the broken boots, the face that was too thin from years of not eating enough. And he said, "You want us to risk everything for a street rogue who doesn't even have a wolf? Look at him." Marin argued. She told them about the animals bowing, about the patrol wolves who had fled from him, about the medallion. The council listened, but listening and believing were not the same thing. Years of hiding had made them careful people. Careful people do not make sudden leaps of faith based on an old woman's story and a boy who smells like rain. Only 2 people in the room did not speak against him. One was a young woman named Saren, who had lost her entire family in the Fracture War. She had grown up on stories of the Kaeldorn line, told to her by her grandmother before the war had taken everything. She sat across the room and watched Akayen with calm, careful eyes that were hard to read. The other was an old blind wolf named Koro, who sat at the far edge of the room and had not spoken during the debate. When the arguments had finally quieted, he said only one thing. "I cannot see him, but I can smell his bloodline from here, and what I smell makes me want to kneel." Nobody listened to the blind old wolf. Akayen walked out of that meeting feeling exactly like what the council believed him to be, A nobody, a street boy, a convenient story for desperate people who wanted something to hope in. He went back to the lower district and told himself it did not matter. He had survived 17 years without a bloodline or a title. He would survive this too. But 10 days later, everything changed. And it did not change quietly. Late one night, Akayan was cutting through the lower district when he heard sounds from a side alley. He slowed, looked, and stopped. 5 Silvercrest patrol wolves had a small family cornered against a dead-end wall. A mother, 2 young children, an elderly male. They wore the plain armbands that registered rogues were required to display. Armbands that in this city meant you had no protection and no one to call for help. The patrol wolves were not arresting them. They were simply enjoying the power they had over people who could not fight back. Akayan stood at the entrance to the alley. Every sensible thought he had told him to walk away. 5 trained wolves against 1 unshifted rogue. He knew how that ended. He had the bruises of past lessons still written into his memory. He walked into the alley anyway. "Let them go," he said. The patrol wolves turned around. They looked at him the way wolves look at someone they find completely unthreatening, with slow, amused smiles. The lead wolf was a Gamma, a ranked fighter. He had likely never once in his life felt afraid of a boy in broken boots. He moved toward Akayan with complete confidence. And then, the binding ritual. Worn thin by 11 years, cracked open by 10 days of truth pressing against it from the inside, broke. There was no dramatic sound, no flash of light, but the alley filled with something that was not visible, and not quite physical. It was pressure, weight, ancient, calm, and absolute. It came from everywhere at once, and it pressed down on every wolf in that alley like a hand from the sky. The patrol wolves froze, their bodies locked into a submission posture that none of them had chosen. The Gamma, ranked, trained, dominant by every measure of his world, dropped to both knees on the wet ground and pressed his forehead to the stone, shaking so hard his teeth rattled. The others followed within seconds, their faces white, their eyes wide and afraid and helpless. Akayan stood in the center of it all. His eyes were pure gold now, not amber, not firelight, gold, bright and deep and terrifyingly calm. His wolf had risen. Not a shape, not a physical shift, but a presence, enormous and ancient, filling the space around him like a second body made of pure authority. He did not speak. He did not need to. The patrol wolves crawled backward out of the alley on their hands and knees, never once looking up, and disappeared into the night. The family stood against the wall, completely still. The 2 children were pressed against their mother. The elderly male looked at Akayan, at those gold eyes, and his own knees gave way slowly, like a man whose legs have simply decided on their own to bow. He sank down and pressed his forehead to the ground, and his voice, when it came, was barely a sound. "Kaeldorn," he breathed, like the word was something holy, like it was something he had given up saying a long time ago. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. In the lower district, people talked. Word moved fast through communities that had no other protection but each other's information. By afternoon, the Underground Council had heard 3 separate accounts from 3 different witnesses. By evening, Saren had personally interviewed the elderly male from the alley, who wept while describing what he had seen and felt. And somewhere much further away, in a place that had no official name on any city map, a message arrived on a desk. Dravek was not dead. He had never been caught, never been brought to any kind of justice after the Fracture War. He had simply stepped backward into shadow, placed obedient wolves in positions of public power, and ruled from a place where no one could see him. He had been comfortable for 11 years. His intelligence was fast and reliable. Within 2 days of the alley incident, a full report was on his desk. A rogue male in Ashenvale. Golden eyes. Prime aura confirmed by multiple witnesses. Underground wolves using the Kaeldorn name. Dravik read it twice, very carefully. Then he set it down. Then he called his commanders into the room and told them, in a very quiet voice, to find the boy, and not to make the same mistake his forces had made 11 years ago when they had left a child behind. The Underground Council met again. This time, Saren had called the meeting herself. She laid every account on the table with steady hands and a calm voice, that made it impossible to dismiss what she was saying. Witnesses, names, details, the elderly wolf's words, the patrol wolves who had not returned to their posts. Councilman Veth sat and listened to all of it without speaking. When she finished, the room was quiet for a long time. Then Veth said, in a rough and tired voice, "Bring the boy in." When Achaean walked into the council chamber for the second time, the room felt different the moment he stepped through the door. Several members looked down at their hands. Others shifted in their chairs. The air changed, that invisible, ancient weight settling over the space, like something that had always been there, only now allowed to breathe. Koro, the blind old wolf, was already bowing before Achaean reached the center of the room. Veth stood. It seemed to cost him something real: pride, certainty, the armor of a careful man who had survived by never being wrong. He lowered himself slowly to one knee, and his voice when he spoke was rough but completely sincere. "My king, I was wrong. Forgive me." One by one, the others followed. Each one knelt. Each one said nothing, because there was nothing adequate to say. Achaean stood among them in his worn clothes and broken boots, and he felt the weight of the moment land on his shoulders. It did not feel like victory. It felt like stone, heavy and permanent and serious. He looked around the room at these people who had spent 11 years hiding, surviving, protecting a hope they were not even sure was real. And he understood something clearly. He could not afford to become simply a new version of the power that had hurt them all. "I don't want to be a symbol," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "I want Dravek stopped. I want the rogue laws abolished. I want every wolf in this city who has been sleeping under a broken archway to have a pack that no one can take from them. If you are kneeling for a king who will just replace one cruel ruler with another, then you are kneeling for the wrong person." Silence. From the back of the room, Saren spoke. Her voice was steady. "That is exactly why we kneel." That night, Achaean walked back to the lower district alone. He stood in front of the broken archway where he had eaten his half loaf of bread in the rain just 10 days ago. He looked at it for a long time. The worn stone, the grooves cut into it by decades of rainwater running down from above. He reached into his shirt and took out the iron medallion. He crouched down and placed it carefully on the ground in front of the archway. Not as a farewell, not as an offering, as a reminder, so that no matter what came next, the danger moving toward the city, the hunters already sent to find him, the war that was not finished but only paused, he would remember where he had started, what had been stolen, what he intended to give back. He stood, he turned, he walked into the dark city with steady steps, and for the first time in 17 years, he walked like someone who knew exactly who he was. Not a street boy anymore, not yet a king in any hall or throne room. Something harder than both, a young man with a name, a bloodline, a purpose, and absolutely nothing left to fear. The ancient war was not over. It had only ever been waiting. And now, at last, it had someone worth fighting for.